I wrote a column that is on offthehooksports.com right now about how important Tim Banks is, about how he's going to have to be a little bit more creative than he was last year. Not like 2022 when he was very creative and just trying to manufacture some sort of defense that had very little to no talent. So, Caleb, I think that Tim Banks, and we'll look at some other figures, is the most important member of Tennessee's football program and the second most important member of Tennessee's athletic department. And let me tell you why. And you can tell me if you agree or disagree. I think he's a very, very good coach. I think Tennessee has some holes to fill. I think that he is capable of doing that, but he has to have a great year. I mean, he has to have a great year, and he wants to have a great year. And I do believe he's going to be hired away as a head coach one day. So you want to get everything you can out of him. But I don't believe Tim Banks is the guy that everybody hated in 2022. I believe that Tim Banks is a solid coach who can put together a wide array of defensive looks up front. And Tim Banks is Tennessee's defensive coordinator, by the way, Bevo's bodyguard. And I believe he can also continue to build a defense that people want to be a part of. I think he's really key. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he's crucial. I think he's absolutely crucial. I think Tim Banks we really underrate. Look, let's put this out here first. Now, this last year was a little bit different, but Josh Heupel wants a program that's going to be all offense first, right?
Yes.
The key on something like that is to make sure the side that you don't mind being a weaker side is as shored up as possible. A lot of times, that's where Tim Banks is absolutely key. It's kind of like an example I could use, like the Golden State Warriors were an offensive team. They focused on 3-point shooting and elite offensive juggernaut play. That's why Draymond Green was so crucial. They needed that defense. He was the one that provided the defensive presence to help offset what everybody else was focusing on. You need Tim Banks in this regard. In that regard, you need him to coach to what is being done by Josh Heupel, and he showed last year he could take it a step further by being the main guy as the coach and winning the games for Tennessee. I think Tim Banks is absolutely critical in that regard and very, very, very underrated. I mean, it's not much different than from the reverse. Now I know early Nick Saban, not Nick Saban when he got Lane Kiffin, but you know this, Dave. Early Nick Saban was totally fine grounding and pounding and winning with defense, right?
Almost to a fault.
Yeah, almost to a fault. But that made the offensive coordinator crucial, right? That's why Jimbo Fisher was such a critical offensive coordinator for him, because Jimbo Fisher knew how to coach to that style of play, and he won a national title at LSU doing it. So I think Tim Banks, you could say, is kind of the same way on the other end. And you're right. I was one of those people that wanted him gone after the South Carolina debacle in 2022. I wasn't aware that South Carolina was probably cheating. And so, but now
when I didn't know the extent of Jeremy Banks either and the distraction that he was.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't know any of that until the next day. So when you take that into account, I'm with you. I think Tim Banks is absolutely crucial to this system. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's why, by the way, I think he is like he's one of the 5 highest paid assistants in college football now, I believe.
Yep. Well, I don't have a problem with that. I'm very high on him, and I think this is a monstrous year for him. So let's play a little bit of 4 Downs, brought to you by our good friends at Ted Russell Ford and Ted Russell Lincoln. You can go to tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net. You will absolutely love the buying experience. So 4 Downs is right now.
Come on, guys, it's game time.
4 Downs. Can you count? 4 downs. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun. Represented by T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. Tennessee's trial attorney. From the Ted Russell Ford Lincoln Studio, East Tennessee's #1 volume and customer service dealer. Ted Russell Ford and TedRussellLincoln.net. Now to the Dave Hooker Show on Off the Hook Sports.
All right. So let's break them down individually the most important people in Tennessee's football program and athletic department. May I go ahead and throw this disclaimer out there? I'm taking out all other sports, including Rick Barnes. And it's not a slide on Rick Barnes, but the bottom line is football makes 90% of the money. Okay. So I'm not discounting them. I mean, you could probably make an argument you'd rather lose Tim Banks and get a good coordinator than Rick Barnes if Barnes has another 5 years in him, but we have to factor in his age as well. So not a knock on Barnes at all. But let's take a look at the most important people in Tennessee's athletic department and football coaching staff, as it is brought to you by our good friends at Ted Russell Ford and Ted Russell Lincoln. Go to tedrussellford.net, tedrusselllincoln.net.
A beacon of hope in a world of high prices. Look to the skies, Knoxville. Super Savings is here. Ted Russell Ford is East Tennessee's #1 Volume 4 dealer. Employee pricing is here. You pay what we pay on all new Ford models. Come see the super dealer today at either Ted Russell Ford location, Parkside Drive, or Kingston Pike.
All righty, here we go. 4 downs right now. Coop, what should people do?
Cooper Mays here. Hit like and subscribe.
All right.
Coop here. First down.
All right. I think most people would say that Rodney Garner is very integral to this defense, to Tennessee's recruiting efforts, but he's not more important than Tim Banks. Now, going hand in hand, I think the worst case scenario, if Banks got a head coaching job, he'd take Garner as a defense coordinator. That would be bad for Tennessee. So, but Rodney Garner is not more important than Tim Banks. Agreed?
Agreed. All due respect in the world to Rodney Garner. I said earlier, like, if he was in my home recruiting my kid, that would be a selling point for me to have my kid go play for Rodney Garner. But at the same time, I mean, a defensive line coach doesn't deal with a lot. Okay, they're more recruiting and then just coaching up toughness, and I just feel like you could replace that fairly easily.
Fair enough. All right, what down, Coop?
Cooper Mays here. Second down.
Any offensive coach, including Josh Heupel?
Well, okay, I would take Josh Heupel over Tim Banks. It's Josh Heupel's program, but
who's more important this year? Because my argument is with Josh Heupel, he's had subpar quarterback play the past 2 years, and Tennessee was still 6th, 7th in the SEC in total offense.
I think that's a testament to how good of a coach Josh Heupel's been. If you lose him, then you're not going to have them being 6th, 7th in the SEC in total offense.
I agree. I guess what I'm saying is Tim Banks is I think you're at least going to be 6th or 7th with Hypel. I think you could be really, really good. But with Tim Banks, there is a little bit more uncertainty because of what happened in 2022. And they weren't just bad in the Columbia game. They were bad before that. So I think Banks is every bit as important as Josh Heupel.
I would think that makes Josh Heupel more important. If you're telling me with Hypel, your floor is 6th or 7th in the SEC, well, then what's your floor without Hypel? I mean, if you don't have Hypel, you could be 14th in the SEC in offense.
Yeah, but you're just not going to win a lot of games if you're 12th in the SEC, and Tennessee has been that on defense.
Okay, but I agree. Let's throw this out. This year, Josh Heupel suspended for the year because he did something stupid. Okay, let's just say that hypothetically happens, all right? Let's just say tomorrow we find out Josh Heupel suspended for the year because he broke some rule. Or tomorrow we find out Tim Banks is suspended for the year because he broke some rule. Which one would likely generate a worse record for Tennessee?
I would say Heupel's absence would be more significant. I just think Hypel is more given.
But then you can't say Tim Banks is more important than Hypel.
Okay. I think regular season he is.
I think now if you compare the rest of the offense, Joey, Joey Halsley, those guys, yes, but we're acknowledging both of us that Josh Heupel's absence would have a bigger deal on the program than Tim Banks.
Yeah. So. Now, Gino brought up a good point. Hot take: Hypel slowed the offense down to keep promise of elite defense. There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, Tennessee's defense was very good last year because its offense wasn't running at a breakneck pace. And I don't know if that's a change because you had Nico and you had Joe the year before, or if that's where Josh Heupel wants to go to have a balanced attack. Perhaps it is, but and there's something about scoring 50 something points in 3 quarters. It's pretty impressive.
Oh, there is. I mean, yes, and I think also I think it's not so much how he played to the defense last year. I think it's about how he adjusted and generated the best running game in the SEC because of that. So I mean, we give him a lot of credit for that. But yeah, anybody else on the offense, I agree with you. Josh Heupel, no. Everybody else on the offense, yes. Tim Banks is more important than, including Joey Halsley.
Actually brings up a good point. Who is your dream staff picks if you could have your pick of anyone? We'll dive into that. Let's continue to this Tim Banks thing. All right, what down, Coop?
Tennessee center Cooper Mays here. Third down.
All right, third down is this. Any player. Tim Banks is more important than any player. If you wanted to make an argument going into last year, you could have said Nico. Now we know in retrospect. You could have said James Pierce because he was projected as the #1 overall NFL pick. But Caleb, there's not a single player on this football team that's anywhere close to as important as James.
No. You mean Tim Banks?
Tim Banks.
Yeah, and I agree. Tim Banks is more important than any player. Tim Banks is more. If you're asking me, and if I'm running Tennessee, and you're saying I have to suspend a player of your choice for the year or Tim Banks, I will be like, I'll suspend the player of your choice. I don't care who he is. I don't care if he's the quarterback. I'm like, there is not one single player more important than Tim Banks to this team.
Let's throw this out there because there's still some kickback with Tim Banks. Not everybody's a fan. Adam says, honestly, Banks has been blown out at least one game every year, including the Ohio State loss last season. That was kind of a perfect storm, Caleb, in my opinion, in that Dylan Sampson got hurt and Ohio State was the best, most talented team in the nation, and it was at their place. I didn't really blame Tim Banks for that.
No, I mean, I blame Tim Banks for not being creative in that moment. He still tried to win with just Jimmys and Joes, but you can't attack Banks for that and let Hypel and the offense off the hook any more than you can against Georgia, because in both instances, Tennessee only scored 17 points.
There we go.
All SEC center Cooper Mays here. Fourth down.
Okay. I think you would agree that nobody's more important than Danny White. He brought Josh Heupel in. He brought Kim Caldwell in. He's created an environment where Rick Barnes isn't gone. And I can go ahead and tell you that Rick Barnes would have been gone, like he flirted with UCLA. He would have been gone under the previous athletic director. He didn't feel like basketball was getting the proper attention, and he would have been gone. So I give White credit for Barnes, even though he didn't hire him. So Danny White's the most important guy. But I would say that after that, there's a real debate between Hypel and Banks. And because I do believe Hypel turns over the defense to Banks, and Banks is essentially the head coach of the defense. So I think there's a real debate there, but I think you would agree Danny White's the most important, right?
Yes, but okay, maybe. But in terms of like, we're doing this whole thing, again, it's about value. It's who's suspended for a year. If you sit there and say this year Danny White can't do anything related to the athletic department for a year because he broke some rule, I'd still rather that if I'm a Tennessee fan than Tim Banks gets suspended for a year.
Okay. Well, and barring something unforeseen, which I guess could be Rick Barnes retiring, that wouldn't be completely unforeseen. But if you had to hire a basketball coach at the end of the year, other than raising money, what is Danny White really doing right now?
Yeah, nothing. Just promoting the program and going on interviews and whatever.
Yep.
So, yeah, at that point,
he really likes the microphone.
He does. And so when you take that into account, I'm going to disagree. I'm taking Tim Banks over Danny White. Not Josh Heupel, but Danny White, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
General Ursa said, I thought Philip Fulmer was AD when Barnes was flirting with UCLA. He was.
That's why he was flirting with UCLA.
Yes. And he almost took that job. And I think if it would have continued, that basketball took a big backseat to football, which it should take somewhat of a backseat, but it shouldn't be overt. If that continued, Caleb, I can go ahead and tell you that Rick Barnes would not be Tennessee's head coach right now, but he'd still be coaching somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. And Rick Barnes and Tennessee got lucky that they had that year right before Rick Barnes was flirting with UCLA, Tennessee had just reached number 1, had a 31 season, reached the Sweet 16. Rick Barnes, he had enough leverage for the boosters to want to throw a lot of money at him. Also, I mean, let's just call it what it is. Beyond the athletic director, Rick Barnes just culturally is just, I mean, if you're a booster at Tennessee, like, is there a better coach you'd want in your environment? Is there a better fit for an environment than Rick Barnes?
No, I think you definitely want Rick Barnes a part of your program, a part of your athletic department. I don't think there's any question about that.
He's basically what they hoped they were getting in Buzz Peterson.
Huh?
You know, a guy from Appalachia, from the region, very connected to the region, knows ball. I mean, basically Rick Barnes was what they thought they had in Buzz Peterson in 2001.
Yep. There you go.